I took the job on the Black Sea rig because I needed to disappear for a while. From debt, from people, from myself. The posting had shown up in a maritime contractor forum. Remote operations, extended deployment, high compensation, Nord Petra drilling. No questions asked. Just a background check and a signature on a 30-page contract. Written in language only lawyers and liars understand. They didn't care about my record. The fights, or the fact that I'd walked off my last job mid-shift. They only cared that I could weld underwater and keep my mouth shut. Double pay, triple isolation. It sounded perfect. The helicopter ride out was the longest 3 hours in my life. The sea below looked like oil itself, a flat, black mirror stretching forever in every direction. No birds, no land, no color. Just that thick sheet of nothingness. The pilot didn't talk. He just kept his headset on and stared straight ahead while the wind screamed around the rotors when we finally saw the rig. It looked less like a platform and more like something that had been built out of wreckage. Twisted metal scaffolds rising from the sea like ribs. Rust streaking down the supports, floodlights still burning in daylight. I remember thinking it looked like a grave marker built for something enormous that had drowned long ago. There were no waves when we landed. The Black Sea was calm, too calm. The water didn't move the way ocean water should. It felt thick, reluctant, as if it were holding its breath. When I stepped off the chopper, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Salt and diesel mixed with something faintly metallic, almost sweet. Like blood on cold steel. Dabra was the first to greet me, a heavyset man, with skin like sandpaper and eyes that never stayed still for long. He handed me a clipboard and pointed at the bottom of the form. "Sign here," he said. "What's this?" "Safety compliance. Everyone signs before first night." The words first night stuck in my head like a splinter. I signed anyway. The rest of the crew looked like they'd been out there too long. Pale skin, cracked lips, that quiet look men get when they've run out of things to say to each other. 12 in total. Engineers, divers, welders, cooks, a patchwork of people who probably had nowhere else to be. Nobody introduced themselves properly. They just nodded, watched, measured out my quarters were small. A single bunk bolted to the wall, a porthole sealed with grime, and a metal locker that smelled like old seaweed. The mattress sloped in the middle, and every few seconds I could hear the slow, deep groan of the rig shifting in the water. It was like living inside something alive that didn't want you there at dinner that night. I tried to make conversation. "So how long have you all been out here?" No one answered. Forks scraped plates, the ventilation hummed, and a single bulb flickered above us. Finally, a thin man with hollow cheeks muttered, "Too long?" Then he got up and left. The mess hall had a bulletin board covered with faded papers, emergency drills, maintenance schedules, weather reports, and a single laminated sheet at the center labeled Rules of Night. Protocol in bold red type. I read them between. Bites of cold stew. No exterior doors open after 2300. Hours. Maintain full blackout conditions. During power failures. Do not use the radio between. 2300-500. Never. Acknowledge voices outside the structure. Report any infractions. Immediately to the shift foreman, I laughed out loud. "Is this some kind of prank?" I asked the cook. He looked at me with a blank face and said, "You'll see." When the supply helicopter left the next morning, it didn't circle back. It just lifted off, disappeared into the gray horizon, and the sound faded until there was nothing but the low pulse of the generators. The realization hit me slowly. We were stranded here until the next scheduled supply run, 3 months away. No boats, no signal once night fell. That evening I walked the perimeter deck alone. The sea looked almost black under the last sliver of sunset. You couldn't see where the water ended and the sky began. Just a single, seamless dark. The air was cold and heavy. Every step made the metal underfoot echo like a drumbeat. Near the railing, I saw something strange. The reflection of the floodlights didn't shimmer in the water. It stayed still, as if the surface were solid glass. I dropped a small nut from my pocket just to watch it fall. It hit the water with a sound that was wrong, not a splash, but a dull thought, like something soft swallowing it. Then silence. When I came back inside, the others were already locking the hatches. Dobrev stood by the main door with a checklist, ticking boxes as each latch slammed shut. "Standard night protocol," he said when he saw me watching. "Every door sealed. Every light out in the exterior sector. What happens if someone doesn't follow it?" He stared at me for a long moment before answering. "They learn." I didn't sleep much that night. The metal creaked and sighed like an old ship, and somewhere deep below, I heard a slow rhythmic thud, too steady to be random. I told myself it was the pump. I told myself a lot of things that first night dot at 2:17 a.m. The lights flickered. Just once. Then everything went silent. The hum of the generators, the buzz of the ventilation, drawn. In the darkness, I could hear something faint, a knocking, maybe, or the sound of waves against the hull, though we hadn't felt movement all day. Then, from somewhere beyond my door, a single metallic tap. Slow, measured .3 knocks. A pause, then 3 more. I froze. Someone whispered my name. I swear they did. It sounded like Pavel, the rookie who'd been in the bunk room across from mine. But his voice was wrong. Stretched thin, echoing as if he were calling from under the water. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I waited until the emergency lights came back on, painting everything in red. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. Only a small puddle of seawater spread from the threshold, leading toward the outer corridor where the hatches were sealed tight. The next morning, Dobrev came to my cabin with his clipboard. "Everything fine?" he asked. I nodded. He wrote something down anyway. When he left, I stared out the porthole. The sky was clear, the sea flat as ever, but something about it felt off. Like it was watching, and that was the moment I realized this place wasn't meant for people. It wasn't built to drill for oil. It was built to keep something inside, or to keep us from letting it out. It didn't take long to realize there was a rhythm to the rig, a strange, mechanical heartbeat that everyone followed without speaking about it. Wake at 0600. Work until the sun dipped below the horizon. Eat. Lock the hatches. Lights out before 2300. After that, silence. Always silence. I thought they were exaggerating at first. Maybe superstition, the kind that grows in places too far from land. But after a week out here, I started noticing the fear wasn't pretend. It was routine, like brushing teeth or tying boots. Everyone obeyed it without question. Dobrev ran the place like a military unit. He wasn't cruel, but there was something about him that made you obey without needing to be told twice. He'd been out here longest. 6 years, he said once, though I could tell it had cost him more than he admitted. His eyes were bloodshot half the time, like he hadn't slept in days. When I asked how he managed to stay sane this far from shore, he just said, "You get used to the noise." What noise? I'd asked. He didn't answer. The second in command was a man named Maring, a sonar technician with a permanent, nervous twitch in his jaw. He handled all comms with HQ and logged seafloor readings every morning. His console was in the control room, a narrow space packed with monitors, radios, and flickering gauges. The hum of the equipment was constant, like a living thing. Sometimes I'd find him sitting there even off duty, just listening through the headphones, his hand hovering over the volume knob. "You hear something?" I asked once. He looked at me blankly. Always. The others were less talkative. A cook named Bazidar, who never smiled. A diver, Anton, whose left arm had a burn scar shaped like a spiral. A mechanic called Rusu, who kept a small wooden cross taped above his bunk. I noticed it once. The cross was upside down. When I asked him about it, he said, "Not mistake. Protection." No one laughed at jokes. No one played cards. The only sound after dinner was the steady clink of cutlery and the faraway hiss of the sea vents. The bulletin board with the rules of night protocol had become part of my daily ritual. I read it every morning, like scripture, though I didn't yet understand why. 5 simple rules, written in red. No exterior doors open after. 2,300 hours. Maintain full blackout conditions. During power failures, do not use the radio between. 2300-500. Never acknowledge voices outside. Structure. Report any infractions immediately to the shift. Foreman. One night during dinner, I finally asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. Why the rules? Fork stopped midair. Dobrov looked up from his bowl, slowly. His jaw tightened. They keep us alive, he said. No one else spoke for the rest of the meal. That silence stayed with me. Later, while walking to the generator room, I found something carved into the metal wall near the stairs. Shallow letters scratched with a knife. Don't look down. It had been etched deep. The edges rusted over. Someone had tried to scrub it off but failed. The generator room was hot, humid and loud, a mechanical heartbeat under the floor. The vibrations made my teeth ache. But beneath that noise, I could swear I heard something slower. Deeper, a pulse that didn't match the rhythm of the engines. Like something heavy shifting far below the rig. That night, while logging my maintenance report, Marin came to my cabin with a flashlight. He looked pale, shaking slightly. Did you hear the tapping? He asked. What tapping? Outside. Hull side. Lower deck. I hadn't, but the fear in his voice made me wish I had. He pressed his ear to the wall, listening. The metal hummed faintly. It comes every few nights, he whispered. Always after lights out. Always from below the waterline. I forced a laugh. Probably pressure changes. Metal contracts. He cut me off. No, it knocks back. The next morning, Pavel, the youngest of us, asked if he could smoke on deck after curfew. Dobrov's head snapped up. Not after 2,300, he barked. You want to disappear like the others? The room went dead quiet. The others? I said. No one answered. By week 2, I noticed something strange about the clocks. Every night around 22:55, they'd all tick slower, just slightly. Like time itself was resisting the approach of 23 o'clock. You could feel the air tighten in the halls. The crew would move quietly, almost ritualistically, shutting hatches, dimming lights, bolting windows. By the time the final latch clicked, the rig would fall into total silence. The stillness of the Black Sea after dark was something I'll never forget. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The water didn't lap against the hull. It pressed against it. As if the ocean itself was listening, one night I stood by the porthole, watching the reflection of my own face in the glass. Behind it, the dark was absolute, a mirror of nothingness. Then, for a fraction of a second, something moved. Not in the reflection, in the water. A ripple spreading outward in perfect circles. I blinked, leaned closer, and saw another reflection behind mine. Eyes open and wide, looking up from the black water below. I stumbled back and nearly knocked over the chair. When I looked again, it was gone. Just my own pale face staring back at me. The next morning, I tried to ask Marin about sonar readings. He said the logs had been corrupted overnight, noise interference from beneath the platform. He played a sample of the static through his headset. At first, it sounded like normal distortion. Then, beneath the hiss, a faint rhythm. 3 slow knocks, a pause. 3 more, exactly the same as the ones I'd heard outside my cabin that first night. That evening, I caught Dobrov staring out toward the sea through a small observation window. His lips were moving silently, like he was counting. What are you looking for? I asked. Confirmation, he muttered. Of what? That we're not next. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the hum of the structure. I stayed there a while, watching the endless horizon. For a moment, I thought I saw faint lights beneath the surface, like city streets, glowing faintly under the waves. Then they blinked out, one by one, until nothing remained. That night, the rules felt less like orders and more like prayers. We weren't following them to keep discipline. We were following them because someone or something was listening, and I had the feeling it wanted us to stop. The first thing you notice after enough nights out here isn't the noise. It's the absence of it. The silence has a weight. It presses on your skin, settles in your lungs. It's not empty. It's full of something that doesn't want to be heard. Days passed, and the sea around the rig stopped behaving like water. It didn't ripple or churn. It didn't even reflect the light properly. When the sun rose, the surface looked matte, like the texture of stone. When it set, the entire horizon turned into a flat expanse of liquid obsidian. Even the wind seemed afraid to touch it. We used to have gulls circling in the first week. By the second, they were gone. Not one feather in the sky. No fish near the surface. The sonar kept pinging back nothing but noise. Marin said it was wave scatter, but the tremor in his voice gave him away. He didn't believe it either. I started waking up at odd hours, sometimes to the sound of the generators dying for a second, sometimes to complete stillness. No hum, no creak, just the sound of my heartbeat in my ears. I'd lie there in the dark, staring at the faint red glow of the emergency light, waiting for something to move, and sometimes something did. It began small. A shadow sliding past the porthole, though we were 40 feet above sea level. Once, a ripple that moved against the wind. And one night, a reflection in the window that didn't belong to me, a shape leaning forward just behind my shoulder. But when I turned, no one was there. The crew had stopped talking about the sea altogether. They moved through their routines like ghosts, eyes down, shoulders tense. Only Dobrev still watched it, but I noticed he never stayed near the railing for long. He'd glance at the water, mumble something under his breath, and then retreat inside. Bolting the door behind him, the Black Sea wasn't just quiet. It was listening. One afternoon, Marin asked me to help recalibrate the sonar system. "It's misreading the depth," he said. "Keeps bouncing back impossible numbers." We went down to the control room together. The monitors were flickering, lines of static crawling across the screen. He typed in a few commands, then frowned. "Depth reading's gone," he muttered. "What do you mean gone?" He turned the screen toward me. "It's not returning data. It's returning," he hesitated. "Movement." The display showed a single, slow pulse beneath the rig, a wave expanding and contracting, almost like breathing. But the frequency, it wasn't random. Every few seconds, the amplitude matched the rhythm of a heartbeat. Slow, deep, alive. Marin killed the monitor and stepped back. His hands shaking. "It's just a sensor glitch," he said, more to himself than to me. "Just a glitch." But the next day, he refused to go near the control room. By the end of the second week, I understood why everyone here looked half dead. The isolation wasn't the hardest part. It was pretending nothing was wrong while something vast and unseen moved below us. Scraping the edges of our sanity. At night, I'd lie awake and listen. Sometimes I could hear faint metallic knocks rising through the floor, followed by a long, low groan, the sound of pressure shifting. Other times, it was softer, like whispers through a pipe. I tried to tell myself it was the sea current, the machinery, anything mechanical. But deep down, I knew the truth. No engine whispers your name. One morning, I found Bazidar sitting in the galley, staring blankly at his hands. His palms were raw, skin cracked and bleeding. "You all right?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Dreams," he said quietly. "The sea dreams. It remembers?" I didn't ask what he meant. That same day, we found one of the lifeboats missing. The ropes had been cut clean, not torn. There were no signs of struggle, no alarms, just an empty space where a boat should have been. Dobrev gathered us that evening, his voice steady, but eyes glassy. "No one leaves," he said. "Not without clearance. Not after dark. Who took it?" Someone asked. "You didn't answer. At dinner? No one ate?" Marin sat across from me, tracing circles into the condensation on his water glass. "The sonar's still picking it up," he whispered. "What?" "The boat. It's still out there. But it's not moving. It's just floating. Like it's anchored to something below." That night, the alarms triggered at 2:11, a long, shrill wail that sent everyone running to their posts. The floodlights outside blinked erratically, sweeping over the platform. The sea below shimmered in strange metallic patterns, like veins pulsing under skin. We gathered in the control room as Dobrev checked the monitors. Power surge from below deck, he muttered. Pressure valves again. Marin's eyes darted to the sonar feed. His lips went pale. No, that's not pressure. That's movement. On screen, something massive was rising. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The scale bar stretched past maximum depth. The form was wide, irregular, but moving upward steadily. Then, halfway to the surface, it stopped. The lights flickered. The alarms cut out. For a few seconds, there was nothing but breathing, not ours, not human. A slow, wet exhale reverberating through the entire rig, vibrating the metal beneath our feet. Then came a low sound, like a voice, but stretched, broken. An impossible. It said something that almost sounded like a name.mine. The lights came back on. The sound vanished. Dobrev shouted for everyone to resume protocol, but his voice shook. Marin sat frozen, staring at the sonar until Dobrev yanked the power cable from the wall. That night, no one slept. I stayed by my porthole, watching the black water glisten faintly under the floodlights. The sea looked still again, calm, lifeless, but I knew better. I could feel the faint tremor through the floor, the same pulse as before. A rhythm, slow and patient, like something alive waiting beneath us. And in that silence, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The Black Sea wasn't empty. It was holding its breath. No one breaks the rules on the rig, not because of fear of punishment, but because of what happens when you do. It was our 17th night when it finally happened. Pavel, the youngest, barely 20, decided the rules were superstition. He had been restless for days, pacing the corridors like a trapped animal, mumbling about how stupid it was to live like prisoners, surrounded by nothing but water. At dinner, he said it out loud. I'm going out tonight, he laughed. Need fresh air. Can't keep breathing this metal. The room froze. Dobrev slammed his spoon down hard enough to crack the table. No one opens a hatch after 2,300. Pavel rolled his eyes. You really believe that ghost story? Dobrev stood, his voice sharp as a blade. This isn't a story. Bezidar muttered under his breath. It's a warning. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. 22:43. Nobody spoke again. When the lights dimmed for curfew, everyone retreated to their bunks except Pavel. I heard his boots clanging against the metal walkway, heading toward the outer deck. I should have stopped him. I wanted to, but I didn't. I just lay there listening as the latch creaked open, a sound I'll never forget. Silence followed. Then the faint hiss of wind slipping through the open door. And then nothing. I drifted in and out of half sleep until the emergency lights flickered once. A dull red pulsed through the corridor. It lasted only a second, but in that second, I heard it, a scream. Distant, short, and quickly cut off. It didn't sound like fear. It sounded like the air being crushed out of someone's lungs. I jumped out of bed and opened the door. Dobrev was already there, flashlight in hand, his face pale and furious. Stay inside, he hissed. But I followed anyway. The outer deck was wet. Not from rain. There hadn't been a drop in weeks, but from something viscous and cold. The air smelled metallic, like ozone after lightning. Pavel's cigarette lighter lay near the railing, the metal warped and blackened. No footprints. No blood. Just that lighter and a patch of deck that looked darker than the rest, like it had been burned in a perfect circle. Where is he? I asked. Dobrev didn't answer. He stared over the railing, scanning the pitch-black water. The floodlights flickered, and for a split second, I saw movement far below, something huge and slow. Retreating into the depths. We ran back inside and sealed the hatch. In the control room. Marin replayed the exterior camera feed. The footage froze at exactly 23:02, just as Pavel stepped onto the deck. Static crawled across the screen until 3:14 when the feed resumed. No sign of him. Just the deck, empty and glistening as if freshly washed. Camera malfunction, Marin whispered. But his hands were trembling. Dobrev leaned against the console, jaw tight. He broke the rule, he said quietly. They always come when someone breaks the rule. I asked. He looked at me, a long, exhausted stare that made me feel smaller than I'd ever felt before. The ones beneath. We filed an official report. Equipment failure. One missing crew member. But the words felt like lies the moment they left my mouth. No helicopter would come for months. No one would even know he was gone. That night, none of us slept. The hallways were thick with tension, every sound magnified, the creak of pipes, the hum of the generator, even our own breathing. Around midnight, the radio in the control room came alive. Not with speech, but with a faint static hum that rose and fell in perfect rhythm. Like breathing, Marin muted it, but the sound didn't stop. It was still there, vibrating through the floor. Then, from the outer deck, something tapped against the metal. Slow, deliberate. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. Buzidar dropped his cup. "It's him," he whispered. "Don't," Dobrev snapped. "Don't you dare answer." The knocking continued, louder this time, moving along the outer wall, like someone dragging a heavy hand across the steel. I felt the vibration against my boots, the cold hum beneath the solace. Then, silence. For the rest of the night, no one spoke. We sat in the control room under dim light, waiting for dawn. When the first gray line of morning crept over the horizon, I went back to my bunk, every nerve burning with exhaustion. When I opened the door, there was water on the floor, a thin trail leading from the porthole to my bed. The air was freezing, wet and sharp. I knelt down and touched it. It wasn't seawater. It was thicker, slightly oily, and smelled faintly of copper. That's when I noticed the sound. Faint, rhythmic breathing. Coming from the vent above my bed, I climbed on the chair and pressed my ear to the grate. For a few seconds I heard nothing. Then a voice, low and hoarse, whispered from inside. "Don't look." I fell back, chair clattering. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out. I ripped the vent open with a wrench. Nothing. Just cold air and the hollow sound of metal echoing back. When I told Dobrev, he didn't react. He just nodded slowly and said, "It happens. It'll stop soon. It always does after they take one, eh?" I asked again. He looked out toward the window, eyes hollow. "You'll hear them too. Everyone does eventually." For the next few days, we worked in silence. Pavel's name was erased from the shift roster. His locker emptied overnight. No one said who did it. The lighter disappeared from the control room shelf where I left it, but the strangest thing was the smell, every night after that. When the clock struck 2,300 and the hatch was sealed, a faint metallic scent filled the air, sharp, wet, and wrong. It clung to the walls, to our clothes, to our skin, and sometimes when the wind was just right. I could hear it again, a single knock on the metal hull, faint but deliberate dot as if something beneath the sea still wanted to be let back in. The night after Pavel vanished, the rules stopped feeling like warnings. They started feeling like confessions. Someone had written them after seeing something. Maybe after losing someone? Maybe both. No one mentioned his name again. His bunk was stripped clean, his nameplate removed, his personal items gone by morning. Dobrev said it was standard procedure, but no one believed him. We just accepted it. On the rig, things disappeared. And so did the memories that came with them, but the sea didn't forget Dot by the end of the week. The wind changed. It carried a sound, a low, slow hum that came from the water itself. You couldn't always hear it, but when you did, it got under your skin. It wasn't wind or machinery. It was something alive, something moving, echoing through the metal bones of the rig. That evening, Dobrev called a crew meeting in the mess hall. No jokes, no chatter. Just the sound of chairs scraping the floor and the storm outside pressing against the windows. He stood at the front, arms crossed, voice flat. "We're activating blackout protocol tonight." Buzidar stiffened. Marin swallowed hard. Everyone else froze. I didn't understand what it meant. Not really. "Why?" I asked. Dobrev looked at me, eyes dark and unblinking. "Because they're close." He handed out flashlights. Small. dim ones, and ordered every exterior light powered down by 21 o'clock. No radios, no machinery, no sound. From the moment the alarm sounds, he said, you move to the interior hall. No talking, no light, no movement. You breathe slow. You wait. You'll know when it's over. What happens if someone doesn't? I asked quietly. He looked at me like he'd already buried the answer. Then the sea remembers their name. The words meant nothing to me then, but later, I'd understand. By 22 o'clock, the rig looked dead. The floodlights went out one by one, until the platform vanished into the black horizon. The silence was so thick you could hear your own pulse. The only light left came from the faint red beacons on the crane towers, like tiny bleeding eyes watching the sea. I tried to stay calm, pacing the corridor, counting seconds. My flashlight beam quivered over the metal walls. I thought of Pavel's lighter, the warp circle on the deck, the voice in the vent whispering, don't look. At 22:48. The alarm went off. It wasn't a siren, more like a slow, mechanical pulse that echoed through the hull, vibrating the air. Dobrev's voice came through the intercom, distorted but clear. Protocol active. All units inside. Now. We killed the lights. The entire rig fell into darkness. In the silence that followed. I heard it. A distant rumble rising from beneath the sea, deep and resonant. The floor vibrated like something massive was moving below. A second later, the power cut completely. Even the emergency lights died. The darkness was absolute. I could taste the fear in my throat. Someone whispered, it's too soon. Shut up, Bazidar hissed. The air pressure shifted. You could feel it, the metal expanding and contracting as something passed under us. Then came the sound, wet, dragging, like flesh sliding over steel. It circled the rig slowly, scraping, breathing. A low groan echoed through the beams. The entire structure shuddered. I heard footsteps, not on the floor, but on the outer walls. Slow, deliberate, impossibly heavy. Then, a voice. It came through the walls like a memory. Soft, human, familiar. Let me in. Pavel's voice. Someone whimpered in the dark. Dobrev hissed, don't respond. The voice came again, closer this time. Please, it's cold. Then another voice joined it. A woman's this time. I didn't recognize it. It's safe now. Open the door. I pressed my palms to my ears, but the sound vibrated through my skull. The walls themselves seemed to speak. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence slammed back down like a lid. We waited. 1 minute, 2, 10. No one moved until the emergency lights flickered back on, painting everything in a faint red glow. Marin was the first to speak. His voice was trembling. What the hell was that? Dobrev didn't answer. He was staring at the wall, his expression hollow. His lips moved, whispering something under his breath. Maybe a prayer. Maybe just the rules. When I looked down, I realized I was standing in water. Thin, shallow, but spreading fast. It seeped from the seams in the floor, black and thick like ink. I touched it. It was warm. Dobrev saw it too. Drainage overflow. He muttered automatically, but he didn't sound convinced. We followed the trail to the lower deck. The drainage valve was fine. The water wasn't coming from inside the pipes. It was coming from the outer wall, leaking inward. I shone my flashlight on it and froze. The metal was warping. It pulsed, like something was pressing against it from the other side. The light flickered. The bulge shifted. For a moment, I could see shapes in it. Outlines of hands, faces, mouths opening silently in the steel. Then the generator kicked back in, and the bulge flattened. DOB or EV ordered the section sealed off. No one goes near it, he said. Ever. We sealed it with weld plates and resin foam, but the sound behind it didn't stop. At night, when the wind was quiet, I could still hear faint thuds from inside the wall, like something trapped, still trying to get through. That was the first time I felt real fear. Not the kind that spikes and fades, but the kind that settles into your bones, into your breathing. The kind that waits. After that night, we followed every rule without question. Doors locked, Lights out. Radio silent. We didn't even whisper after 2300 dot, but even with the protocol, the sea never stayed quiet for long. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I'd wake to the sound of footsteps in the hall. Slow, wet, too heavy to belong to anyone human. And always, just before they stopped, I'd hear a faint voice through the metal. Let me back in. The day after the blackout protocol, the air on the rig changed. It was thicker somehow, harder to breathe, harder to think. The crew walked slower, spoke less. Even the machinery sounded different, like it was working under water dot no one mentioned the night before. Not even Dobrov. But I could see the truth written on everyone's faces. Whatever had pressed against the hull wasn't gone. It was waiting. I was in the storage bay when I found the notebook dot. It was wedged behind a crate of rusted diving tanks. Its cover warped by moisture. The words, property of Leonid Koval Dive Team 3, were faintly visible on the front. I didn't recognize the name. Inside were pages of cramped handwriting, smudged and water-stained. The first few entries were normal. Inspection dates, pressure readings, oxygen levels. Then, halfway through, the tone changed. The 8th of March. Heard noises under deck B. Thought it was a pump. Checked with Marin. He says sonar's picking up movement, but nothing visible. The 12th of March. Diver Rensick didn't resurface. Tether snapped. We found his helmet drifting under the rig. Inside a visor looked. Burned. The 14th of March. Saw something below platform. Looked like a crack in the seafloor, but it moved. Glowed faintly red. Told foreman. He said to log it and forget it. The entries went on like that. Short, frantic, increasingly disjointed. The handwriting grew jagged. Words scrawled over each other. It's not the seafloor. It's breathing. Sound keep calling my name. It's looking up. And the last line, written in thick, smeared ink that had bled across the page. It's not the seafloor. It's an eye. I closed the book slowly and stared at the floor. The hum of the rig sounded distant, hollow. My reflection in the puddle by my boot was trembling, not from my movement, but as if the metal beneath me was vibrating. When I showed the log to Marin, he went pale. Leonid, he whispered. He was on the first crew. 3 years ago. What happened to them? They left, he said too quickly. Left how? He didn't answer. That night, Marin didn't eat. He sat by the sonar console long after shift ended, staring at the monitor's dark screen. I'd passed by once and saw him whispering softly, almost chanting under his breath. Stay down there. Stay down there. At 2 a.m., the alarms triggered again. Not for a blackout, but for internal access breach. A hatch on the lower maintenance deck had been open. Dobrov assembled the response team. Me, Marin, and Rusu. We descended through the narrow stairwell, flashlights cutting through the fog of condensation that hung in the air. The hatch was open, just enough for water to seep in. The floor was slick, covered in a thin film of black liquid. The smell hit us first, metallic, sweet, rotten. Who opened this? I asked. No one did, Dobrov said grimly. It opened from the outside. We sealed it again with reinforced bolts, but the damage was already visible. The pressure gauge on the wall pulsed erratically, as if reacting to some unseen heartbeat below. When we returned to the control room, Marin went straight to the sonar. He turned on the feed, and for a second, nothing happened. Then the screen filled with motion. A shape, huge, circular, irregular, was rising slowly beneath the rig. It wasn't solid. It pulsed, expanded, contracted, like a jellyfish miles wide. The readings glitched, spiking into impossible ranges. Dobrov slammed the power off. No one logs this, he said. You understand? No one. Marin looked like he was going to argue, but then the lights flickered again, just once, and every screen in the control room filled with static. In the noise, I heard it again. A sound, not words, but rhythm. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Marin's hand shook on the dial. It's mimicking, he whispered. It's learning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I took the notebook back to my cabin and kept reading. even though every instinct screamed to stop. The last few pages were frantic, covered in overlapping sentences. Dobrev knew. He always knew. It's not alive. It's awake. The rules aren't to protect us. They're to keep it asleep. Then the very last note, written in shaky, almost childlike letters. It dreams through us. The words repeated across 3 more pages, smaller each time until they faded completely, when I finally looked up from the log. It was 3:03 a.m. The rig was silent, the kind of silence that comes before pressure changes. I stood and felt the faintest tremor under my feet, like distant thunder underwater. I went to the porthole and looked out. The horizon was invisible, just blackness. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw a faint light below the surface. A pulse, deep and red. It blinked once, dot, then again, dot, and each time it blinked, the air in my cabin shifted, like the sea itself was breathing in sync with me. I stumbled back, heart racing. My flashlight flickered, then died. In that instant of darkness, I saw it, reflected in the glass. A vast round shape staring up through the black water, not glowing anymore. Just open. Watching Dot the power returned. The image vanished. But I knew what I saw. When I told Dobrev the next morning, he didn't look surprised. He just said quietly, "Now you understand why the rules exist." I asked him what it was. He didn't answer. He just stared out the window at the unmoving sea and whispered something I barely heard. A single word. Leviathan. That was the first time I realized the Black Sea wasn't a body of water, Dot. It was a body. I volunteered for night watch 3 days later. It wasn't bravery. It was obsession. Ever since I read Leonid's notebook, I couldn't stop thinking about what lay below us. Every sound, every vibration, it all felt connected. Like the sea was aware of me now, watching, waiting. Dio, BREV, didn't argue when I offered to take the shift. He just said, "Don't look too long." The control room at night feels like a coffin with lights, cold metal, faint hum of machinery, static whispering through the combs. The rest of the rig sleeps like a dead thing, but the structure itself, it never does. It creaks, shifts, breathes. Marin joined me for the first hour, tapping nervously on the sonar console. The screen flickered between static and readings that made no sense. Waves of interference forming patterns too deliberate to be random. They pulsed every few minutes, in rhythm with something deep below Dot at 22:56. He removed his headphones, face pale. "It's back," he whispered. Dot the feed was normal for a moment. Then a distortion rippled through it, like something passing between the sonar and its target. The sound that followed wasn't mechanical. It was organic, wet, guttural. Dot, and then came the voice. Not words, but tones, rising and falling like a chant, repeated 3 times. Then silence. Marin unplugged the system. "That's it for tonight," he said quickly, avoiding my eyes. "We log interference and shut down. No more." He left, but I stayed. I couldn't help it. I turned the monitors back on. The exterior cameras showed nothing but fog and Black Sea, the floodlights cutting thin beams into the mist. But every now and then there'd be motion, faint, almost imperceptible. Something gliding past the camera's edge, too big to identify. Dot at 23:08. Camera 4 glitched. The screen blurred, then refocused. A human silhouette stood at the far end of the deck. I froze. The figure was motionless, facing the railing. Too far for me to see its face. The time stamp flickered. The feed cut to static, then came back, and the figure was gone. I switched to camera 2, nothing. Camera 3, nothing. But on camera 5, the one near the southern walkway, there it was again. Closer now that it was standing just outside the sealed hatch. The same one Pavel had opened. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to wake the others, but I couldn't move. The monitor zoomed slightly as the lens refocused. The figure's head tilted, slow, unnatural, like a puppet hanging by invisible strings. Then, as if sensing me, it turned toward the camera. There was no face. Just darkness, rippling like water. The power flickered. And the room went black. I heard something, a faint tap on the glass of the observation window behind me. Once, twice, then silence. When a backup generator kicked in, I turned slowly. The porthole was covered in condensation. But in the fog, 3 words had been traced by a finger from the outside. Still here now. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the chair. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the hum of the machinery dot at 3 o'clock. Dobrov came in for inspection. I told him what I saw. He didn't look surprised. He just exhaled slowly and said, "It mimics what we remember." "What does that mean?" I demanded. "It knows how to wear their shapes," he said quietly. "It's learning to speak." He walked to the monitors, replayed the footage, and froze on the static frame where the figure had stood. "That's not the first time," he muttered. "What do you mean?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "It started years ago. The night crew kept seeing reflections of themselves outside the rig. The deeper they drilled, the more it appeared. That's when the rules were written." He turned toward me, eyes heavy. "When it starts showing faces, we're running out of time." He left me alone after that dot around 4:15. I started hearing noises from the outer decks, faint clanks, then footsteps. I checked the radar. No movement. No wind. But the sound grew louder, moving across the metal walkways dot, and then, from the far end of the hall, I saw a shadow moving under the flickering light. Slow, dragging steps. A hand brushed along the wall, wet. Leaving a dark smear behind, I aimed my flashlight. Nothing. Just a smear. A dark streak leading to the seal patch. The smell hit next. Salt. Iron. Decay. I leaned closer. The smear wasn't oil. It was blood. I lifted the latch slightly. Not enough to open, just enough to hear. And from the other side came a sound like breathing through water dot slow. Heavy. Then, a voice. Low. Wet, familiar. "Help me." "Open it," Pavel's voice. I froze. My throat went dry. The voice came again, softer this time, closer to the door. "It's me, please, I'm cold." The door vibrated slightly, as if something pressed against it from the other side. My hand hovered over the latch. I wanted to believe him. "God help me." I almost did. Then Dobrov's voice echoed behind me. "Step away from the hatch." I turned. He was standing there, flashlight trembling in his grip. His face looked like he hadn't slept in days. "That's not him," he said. "Not anymore." We sealed the hatch with reinforced clamps. Dobrov didn't leave the room until dawn dot when morning came. I checked the cameras again. The deck was empty. The smear was gone. Only the fog remained, thick and unmoving. Before leaving, Dobrov placed a folded note on the console. His handwriting was rough but clear. "If it starts calling your name, do not answer. It's how it finds you in the dark." That was the moment I realized the rules weren't just for survival. They were for containment, and I had already broken one. By the next evening, the entire rig smelled like rust and seawater. Not the normal tang of salt, heavier, sweeter, almost rotten. It clung to everything, the walls, our clothes, even the food. Bezidar tried boiling coffee to mask it, but the steam came out gray. The scent was strongest near the storage corridor. That's where we found the trail. It began as a faint, damp streak on the metal floor. Not quite water, not quite oil. When you knelt close, it shimmered faintly, like the skin of a jellyfish. Dobrov followed it in silence, flashlight steady, until we reached the sealed maintenance door, the one from the night of the blackout. The resin foam seal was warped, cracked down the center. Something had pushed out from the inside. Pressure change. Marin whispered. Dobrov shook his head slowly. No, something got through. We unbolted the upper panel, just enough for a flashlight beam to slip through. The smell hit first. Copper, mold, and something else beneath it. Something organic. Then we saw it. The metal floor was warped in places, bowed upward, as though the steel had softened and were frozen. There were shapes imprinted in it, palm-like depressions, dozens of them, pressed from below. We resealed the door, back in the control room. Dobrov gathered us like a priest before confession. Listen carefully, he said. We stick to protocol. No one goes near that door after dark. No exceptions. He wrote a new rule on the wall in red marker. 6. If something speaks in his voice. It isn't him. No one asked whose voice he meant. We all knew that night the tapping returned. It began under the floor. Faint, distant, rhythmic. Then it moved to the walls. Thok, 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 always in threes. The air pressure dropped and the lights dimmed to a dull orange. The smell grew stronger. I was in my bunk when the whispering started. At first, it was just breath, soft like wind through pipes. Then, slowly, it formed words. Still here. Still cold. Open. It came from the vent above me. I pulled the cover off. Nothing inside. Just dark tubing and the faintest sound of water dripping somewhere deep in the system. But when I turned to leave, something cold fell onto my cheek. A drop of water. I wiped it away and froze. It was red. By morning, the lower storage lights were dead. Rusu volunteered to check the fuse box, but he never came back up. DOBREV ordered a lockdown. Everyone inside the main sector until dawn, he said, when we went to find Rusu. His flashlight was still rolling slowly on the floor near the breached door, spinning like it had just been dropped. The beam pointed toward the seam where the foam seal had split wider overnight. Inside the crack. Something pulsed, not light, movement. Slow, rhythmic. The faint glow came from the other side of the metal, spreading outward like veins under translucent skin. Back away, Dobrev whispered. Now, we barricaded the corridor. That night, none of us could sleep. The rig was breathing again, a low vibration underfoot that rose and fell every few seconds. Marin sat at the comms, trying to contact HQ. But every transmission came back distorted. I put on the headset once to listen. Static, then faint voices. Layered and delayed, overlapping like echoes in a cave. Depth 30. Gone. Open. Still moving. Not alone. We're inside it now. I tore the headset off. At 1:42. The backup alarm screamed, not the normal pulse, but a continuous wail. The deck lights outside flickered to life, bathing the fog in sickly yellow. Then the power died. Everything went black. We heard the metal groan, louder this time. Something huge scraped along the rig's lower supports. The whole structure tilted slightly to one side. Then came the sound of water rushing through the lower vents. Seal the hatches, Garbrev shouted. I ran to the corridor, heart pounding. Water was flooding from the breached door, black, thick, and full of something moving beneath the surface. It wasn't rising fast, but it wasn't stopping either. Bazidar slipped on the slick floor and went under for half a second. When I grabbed him, his eyes were wide, mouth open, like he'd seen something in that water. What did you see? I gasped. He didn't answer. He just whispered, faces. We dragged him out and sealed the door again with welding plates. The metal hissed and buckled under pressure, but it held barely. Afterward, Bazidar wouldn't speak. He sat in the mess hall, shivering despite the heat, muttering over and over, it's not outside anymore. When the sun finally rose, the sea was unnaturally calm. The fog had cleared, and for the first time in weeks, the sky was visible, pale blue, almost peaceful. But something about it felt wrong, like the air itself was watching us. We went to inspect the breach area. The water had receded. The floor was dry again, as if it had never flooded. But the weld plates were gone. The resin foam, too. The entire wall looked untouched. Smooth, clean. Perfect. Except for one thing. Scrawled across the center of the door, in thick black streaks that hadn't been there before, were 3 words: follow the rules. The letters dripped slowly, the liquid still wet. I touched it without thinking. It was warm. That's when Marin screamed. He was staring at the security monitor. Camera 6, the external hull feed. The image was distorted by interference, but clear enough to see what had terrified him. A human figure, floating just below the surface of the sea. Arms limp, face turned upward. Pavel. His body hovered motionless in the current. Eyes open, mouth moving faintly as if whispering. Then, without a ripple, He sank back into the dark. The screen went black. Dobrev turned off the monitor and said, "We don't talk about this again." But no one slept after that. Because in the silence that followed, we all heard it, faint, wet, echoing up through the metal floor from the depths below. Not a voice, a heartbeat. After the breach, something changed in the air. You could feel it the moment you stepped out of your cabin. The heaviness, like being deep underwater even though you were still breathing air. Everyone moved slower. Every sound seemed sharper. The rig wasn't just old metal anymore. It was the wake. Marin stopped sleeping altogether. I'd find him in the control room at dawn, staring at the sonar monitor, even though it was powered off. He said he could still hear it, the pulse from below. He started calling it the heart dot at first. I thought he'd lost it. But then I began to hear it too. You couldn't always catch it. It came between sounds, like a low hum vibrating in your bones. It was slow, too slow to be machinery, and every beat felt alive. Dobrev ordered everyone to stay off the lower decks. No maintenance shifts after sundown, he said. No work near the sub-level hatches. No one argued. The rig had stopped being a workplace. It was a cage now, and we were the ones trapped inside. 3 nights after the breach, the noise began again. Not the heartbeat, the knocking. 3 dull hits coming from directly below the mess hall. We froze mid-meal. Pressure shift, Dobrev said. Too fast. His fork trembled in his hand. Marin looked at him and whispered, "That's not pressure." The knocking came again, louder this time, echoing through the plates. Then the sound of water rushing beneath us, not like waves, but like something moving through the water, circling. Bozidar stood abruptly, his face pale. "It's feeding," he muttered. "That's what it does." Dobrev slammed his fist on the table. "Sit down." But none of us moved for a long time after that night. I dreamt of the sea. I was floating just above the surface, staring down at the rig's reflection. Except it wasn't a reflection, it was a mouth. The structure below twisted, reshaping itself, opening. Inside, lights flickered like teeth. When I woke up, the sheets were damp with seawater by morning. The fog had thickened so much that we couldn't see the end of the deck. The air was humid, heavy, humming faintly with static. Marin tried to run a sonar scan, but the display refused to show depth. Instead, it showed movement all around us. "Something's under the rig," he said, his voice shaking. "How big?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's not one thing, it's many." The readings pulsed irregularly, spreading outward in slow, deliberate waves. The sea wasn't just silent now. It was alive at 14 o'clock. One of the external cameras went offline. Dobrev sent me and Anton, the welder, to check it. The catwalks were slick with condensation, and every step echoed down into the fog. Halfway to the camera, we heard it. A faint scraping coming from beneath the metal floor. Anton crouched down. "You hear that?" Before I could answer, the platform trembled. Once. Like a deep exhale, the sound rose through the steel, wet, dragging, like a massive body sliding just below us. We ran. By the time we reached the control room, 2 more cameras were gone. Static replaced their feeds. Marin sat hunched over the console, whispering to himself. "What's happening?" I asked. He pointed to the radar. "Look, on the display, the water around us shimmered with movement. Dozens of shapes, long and sinuous, circling the rig. They never breached the surface, just swam in perfect, silent loops." Bezidar crossed himself. "They're surrounding us?" Dobrev said nothing. He just turned off the screen. That night, none of us followed the blackout schedule. We left some lights on, small ones, barely enough to see, just so we didn't have to face the dark. Around 2 o'clock, I went to refill the generator tank. On the way, I passed the observation window in the hallway. For a moment, curiosity got the better of me. I looked out. The sea glowed faintly red, not light reflected from above, light coming from below. I pressed my hand against the glass. The vibration was stronger than before, rhythmic, pulsing, deliberate. Then, in the crimson glow beneath the waves, something moved. It was enormous. A vast shape, spiraling upward through the murk, too big to comprehend. The glow wasn't coming from it. It was coming through it like the body was translucent. I could see veins, arteries, organs, each one pulsing in time with the heartbeat dot as it rose. The rig tilted. Metal screamed. Pipes burst. The glass of the window trembled under my palm, and then, just before it reached the surface, it stopped. The glow faded. The heartbeat slowed. Silence stopped by morning. Everything looked normal again. The fog was gone. The water was still. But the rig was leaning a few degrees to one side, not enough to collapse, but enough to feel wrong. Marin sat in the corner of the mess hall, staring at nothing. "It's testing us," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. "It wants to see who breaks first." Bezidar stopped eating after that. He spent hours whispering prayers, his lips cracked and bleeding. Dobrev barely left the control room. Every day he looked thinner, like something was draining him. I started hearing a heartbeat everywhere. In the pipes. The walls. Even in my skull when I tried to sleep. Sometimes I didn't match my own pulse. Other times it didn't. That I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the porthole again. The sea was black and motionless. No glow, no movement, just silence. Then, faintly, something surfaced. Not a wave, a shape, a human figure, face down, drifting toward the rig. Pale, bloated, hair floating, like seaweed. I grabbed the binoculars and froze that it was Rusu, the mechanic who'd vanished near the breach. His eyes were open, reflecting the faint deck light. His mouth was moving underwater. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the rhythm of them. 3 syllables. Over and over. Then, without warning, he sank straight down, like something had grabbed his legs. No splash. Just gone. The sea rippled once. Then, stilled. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. Because we all heard it again, sometime before dawn, deep beneath the hull, resonating through the metal like thunder trapped underwater. A sound no one could mistake anymore. Not a pulse. Not pressure. Chewing. The next morning, 3 men were gone. Their bunks were empty, blankets folded neatly, boots lined by the door. No signs of a struggle. Just absence. The kind that feels deliberate. Dobrev said nothing during roll call. He just marked their names off on his clipboard and stared at the wall for a long time. When Marin tried to contact HQ about the disappearances, the radio didn't connect. The console lights came on, the static hissed, but no response came through. Not even interference. It was like the frequencies themselves had gone hollow after half an hour of failed transmissions. Marin noticed something strange. The console's outbound signal light was still blinking. "That shouldn't be on," he said. "We're not transmitting." But we were. He checked the log and saw the last outgoing message was yesterday morning, still looping in the queue. A pre-recorded maintenance report we hadn't sent. Yet the system showed continuous transmission. Someone or something had hijacked our comms. Dobrev ordered the radio shut down. But even after Marin cut the power, the faint sound of static persisted, a soft whispering buzz leaking from the speaker. I leaned closer, and through the hiss, I heard words dot my name, repeated once, then again, then silence. I stumbled back, and Marin slammed the speaker off completely. His hands were trembling. "It's mimicking us," he said. "It's learning our voices." We stopped using the radio after that dot 2 days later. I noticed something else missing. The incident logs. The old spiral-bound notebooks that recorded shift rotations, safety reports, and equipment readings, all gone from the cabinet. Dobrev swore he hadn't moved them. But someone had replaced them with new ones. Blanked out, it wasn't just the paper. Even the digital logs were wiped. Marin's entire data archive, sonar recordings, pressure readings, timestamps, empty. Only the file headers remained, all dated the same day. The day of the breach. Somebody deleted everything, Marin said. But the backup drive's been disconnected for months. That's impossible. Bezidar muttered from his seat. Maybe it didn't want proof. He was half joking, but nobody laughed. That evening, the sea was still again. Too still. The horizon looked like a wall of black glass. Not even the wind moved. The rig groaned softly, like it was breathing in its sleep. At 21 o'clock, the PA system crackled to life. No one was near the console. Dobrov had locked the control room. Yet, through the static, a familiar voice came over the speakers. Status report. Division 7, it said, calm, professional, exactly like the HQ operator's tone. But we hadn't contacted. HQ. The line went silent for a moment. Then, copy that. All units accounted for. Commencing transfer. The sound cut off. Transfer. I whispered. Transfer where? Dobrov's face went pale. He ran to the control room, yanked the comm panel open, and pulled the internal fuse block. The sound stopped, but not before a faint echo whispered through the intercom, layered beneath the static. We're waiting. That was the first time I saw Dobrov scared. Really scared. He shut down every comm device on the rig. From now on, nothing speaks to shore. Nothing listens either, he said. We're cut off. He was right. For the next 3 days, no signal came or went. The GPS blinked blank coordinates. Our location, according to the readout, didn't exist. The rig's identification number had vanished from the Maritime Registry database Marin used to access reports. We weren't just lost. We'd been erased. Marin stopped checking the monitors after that. He said the sonar wasn't showing water anymore, only noise. Like the sea had become a void. But the worst part was the nights. Every night at exactly 23:47. The emergency broadcast alarm would click on, one short beep. Always the same time. No message followed. Just that single pulse. On the fourth night, Bazidar snapped. He ran to the deck, shouting at the dark horizon. You want me? Take me. We dragged him back inside. He fought us, screaming about the mouths in the water. When we finally got him restrained in the infirmary, he was muttering something over and over. They don't eat flesh. They eat memory. We left him there with the lights on. By morning, his bunk was empty, no sign of forced entry. Door still locked. Only thing left was his cross, laid neatly on the pillow, right side up this time. After that, I checked the roster every few hours. I started marking names on my arm with a pen, just to make sure I didn't forget who was still alive. There were 6 of us left now. That night, the power flickered again. The emergency lights came on, red and dim, casting everything in a pulsing glow. The air felt thicker, humid. I could taste metal when I breathed in the hallway. I heard the sound again, knocking. But this time, it wasn't under the floor. It was coming from the ceiling. I followed it to the stairwell. The noise stopped, then, faintly, above me, footsteps slow, heavy, deliberate. I called out. Who's there? Silence. I climbed halfway up the stairs before I saw it. A shadow leaning against the upper railing. It looked human at first, but wrong if proportions were slightly off. Its head tilted too far. Bennett spoke. My own voice. Stop climbing. I froze. The shadow moved slightly, and I heard a sound like dripping water hitting metal. When the lights flickered, it was gone. I ran back down. In the control room. Marin was staring at the blank monitors again. They're copying us, he whispered. They're using our own echoes to replace us. He turned toward me slowly, eyes wide and unfocused. How many of us were here when you arrived? 12, I said. He shook his head. No, there were 13. I didn't know what terrified me more, that he might be wrong. Or that he might be right. That night, when I tried to sleep, I kept hearing faint whispers under my bed, voices repeating our names like a roll call, and somewhere in that list, I heard mine twice. By the next morning, the rules had changed. The printed sheet in the mess hall, the one we all passed without reading anymore, wasn't the same. It still hung in the same place, held by the same 4 rusted pins, but the text was different. New, the paper looked older, yellowed, as if it had always been there. The top line was gone. The words Rules of Night Protocol had been replaced with a single typewritten phrase. Do not look directly at the sea after 2,300 hours. Underneath, The numbering had changed. The old 5 rules had been replaced by 12. And rule number 1 was that new line. Do not look directly at the sea. No one admitted to changing it. DOPREV. Swore he hadn't touched the board. Marin said the printer hadn't worked in weeks. But there it was, perfect alignment, smudged only by fingerprints. I read the new rules one by one. My throat dry. One. Do not look directly at the sea after. 2,300 hours. 2. Do not respond to voices that sound familiar. 3. Seal all observation windows. Before dark. 4. If the power goes out, remain absolutely still. 5. Never record audio after midnight. 6. If a crew member forgets your name. They are not your crew. 7. Keep the floodlights dim. They attract attention. 8. Do not attempt to leave the rig. 9. Never remove the ear protection near the lower decks. 10. If you see something on the water that looks like a reflection. It is in single quotes. T.11. Avoid speaking your own name aloud. After nightfall. 12. Do not acknowledge the 13th crew member. I must have read that last one 5 times. The 13th crew member. When I looked up, Marin was staring at me with hollow eyes. It's a warning, he whispered. From who? I asked. He looked toward the sea through the glass window. Who? What? That afternoon, Dobrev had us tape black plastic sheets over every porthole. No light, no reflection, he said. The more you see, the more it sees. I asked him what that meant. He didn't answer. That night, we followed the new rules. At exactly 23 o'clock. All exterior lights went out. The rig went dark, the only illumination coming from the dim red emergency glow. I stayed in my bunk, headphones in, listening to the hum of the generator. The silence between beats was deafening. Then, faintly, someone knocked on my door. 3 slow taps. Who is it? I asked. No answer. I opened the door an inch. The hallway was empty. Then, as I turned to close it, I saw something on the wall, a wet handprint, smeared along the middle. It wasn't human-sized. The fingers were longer, too many joints. I backed away slowly. The air changed. The low hum of the rig became a deep vibration. The lights flickered, and for a split second, the black plastic over my porthole lifted slightly, like something was pressing against it from outside. I grabbed the corner of the sheet and held it down. Through the thin layer, I saw movement, not shapes. Exactly, but distortions, as if the sea itself was alive, pressing its face against the glass. Then something knocked from the other side. Soft, deliberate. Don't look. I whispered to myself. The sound stopped. The next morning, Marin was gone. His bunk was untouched, but his headset lay on the floor beside a folded piece of paper. It said only 3 words. I heard myself. We found him 2 hours later. Or rather, we found something that looked like him. He was standing barefoot on the outer deck, eyes open, staring out over the sea. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. The wind didn't touch him. His skin looked wrong, stretched too tight, almost translucent. Dobrev approached slowly. Marin? The thing turned its head. The bones in its neck cracked as it moved, one by one. Then it smiled. Not with its mouth. With its eyes, the whites of them rippled, as if something beneath the surface was moving. Dobrev raised his hand slowly, signaling me to stay back. Then he stepped closer, reaching out. The thing that looked like Marin tilted its head again. And in his exact voice, it said, "You shouldn't have looked." Then it stepped backward, off the deck, into the sea. No splash. Just gone. The water didn't even ripple. When we checked the cameras later, the footage glitched out at that moment. But a single frame, frozen halfway through the static, showed something below the surface. Dozens of pale faces, pressed against the underside of the water. Eyes open, mouths wide. Moving in silence. That was the night Dobrev changed the rules again. He taped a 13th line beneath the others. Handwritten in permanent marker. 13. Once you see them. They see you. He stared at it for a long time afterward, muttering something to himself in Bulgarian. When I finally caught what he was saying, It wasn't a prayer dot, it was a countdown. 13 names, he whispered. It only needs 13. I didn't ask what it was dot by then. I already knew. The Black Sea wasn't just alive. It was hungry dot, and now it knew every one of our names. The morning after Marin vanished, the sky turned the color of ash. The sea was unnervingly calm, not glassy, not frozen, but still, like it was holding its breath. Even the waves that usually slapped against the rig's base were gone. It was as if the entire Black Sea had stopped moving God at breakfast. Dobrev didn't sit with us. He stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, staring at that motionless horizon. The rest of us picked at our food in silence, too afraid to ask what came next. When the radio crackled to life around noon, we all froze. A voice came through. Steady. Monotone, official. Division 7, this is Nordpetra Command. Confirm receipt of message? Dobrev lunged for the console, eyes wide. Command, this is Dobrev. We read you. We've had multiple casualties. Communication failure. And the voice cut him off. Proceed with sub-level pump inspection. Priority order. Depth check protocol 6. Dobrev's knuckles whitened around the mic. That area is sealed. We've had breaches down there. Confirm compliance. The voice repeated dot, then silence. The radio light stayed on, but the line went dead. Bazidar stared at Dobrev. That wasn't command. He didn't answer dot by evening. The order was written into the system log, stamped with HQ's verification code. Somehow, our disconnected system had received an encrypted message through a dead frequency. And just like that. The descent was official dot. We gathered near the maintenance shaft, the same one that had flooded weeks ago. The air inside smelled of iron and damp insulation. Every step downward echoed like it was falling into a throat. The lights flickered, one by one, leaving long stretches of darkness between them. The sublevel was colder than the upper decks. The walls dripped with condensation, the pipes humming with faint vibration. Dobrev led the way, flashlight beam cutting through the mist. I followed close behind, my heartbeat sinking with the metallic thuds beneath our feet at the bottom. We reached the main valve chamber, or what was left of it. The floor was warped, twisted like metal softened under heat. The walls bulged outward, and a dark film coated every surface. It shimmered faintly in the light like wet skin. God, whispered Anton. What happened here? Dobrev crouched beside one of the valves. The steel was dented from the inside. Something had pushed out. He ran a hand across it and froze. His fingers came away red. Not paint. Not rust. Blood. Bazidar gagged, covering his mouth. We're going back, he said. Now? But Dobrev ignored him. He moved toward the back wall where a faint pulsation distorted the metal. A rhythmic swell. Slow and deep, like breath. I felt it before I saw it. The vibration crawling up through my boots, into my bones. The wall wasn't metal anymore. It was flesh. The flashlight beam trembled as Dobrev pressed it closer. The texture was unmistakable, wet, fibrous, alive. Veins throbbed beneath the translucent surface, branching in crimson webs that converged into a central mass, the size of a door. It was moving, expanding and contracting with each pulse. Dobrev whispered something in Bulgarian I didn't understand. Then he turned to me. Get Marin's logs. He's gone, I said. His face went blank. Then it already knows. A crack split across the membrane, and a dark fluid oozed through, dripping onto the floor. The smell was unbearable. Salt, copper. Decay. Then we heard it. A sound that didn't belong in any human throat. Low. Wet. Gurgling like speech trying to form underwater. Anton took a step back. It's saying something. I strained to listen. The noise came in bursts like bubbles rising through mud. Then it became clear, rearranging into broken syllables. Do. Not. Leave. Dobrev staggered backward. Seal it, now. We grabbed the welding torches, sparks flying as we tried to close the valve housing, but the heat only made it worse. The membrane reacted, shrinking, tightening, like muscle contracting around a wound. And from within it, something pushed. A hand. No, not a hand. something that had learned the shape of one. Its skin was pale, thin as tissue, and where fingernails should have been were translucent ridges that flexed like gills. It pressed against the steel, sliding upward, leaving streaks of dark residue. Bazidar screamed. We ran. The lights flickered out one by one behind us as we climbed the ladder. Halfway up, Anton's foot slipped. He fell 3 meters before we caught him. When I looked down, my flashlight caught a glimpse of the chamber below and froze. The entire floor was moving. Dozens of shapes, pressed against the metal from underneath, distorting it like something massive was crawling up through the structure. The pulsations grew louder, heartbeat merging with groaning steel until they became one sound. We sealed the hatch, bolted it, welded it shut, and even after it was closed, we could still hear it, a muffled knocking. Slow, patient, rhythmic. By the time we reached the upper deck, Dobrev looked 10 years older. His face was gray, eyes sunken. Bazidar was shaking uncontrollably. You knew? He whispered. You knew what was down there? Dobrev didn't deny it. He just said, it wasn't supposed to wake up. He walked to the mess hall and sat alone in front of the new rules. His hand hovered near the 13th line. Once you see them, they see you. Then he added another, his handwriting jagged and uneven. 14. Do not descend. The sea remembers what's below. He taped it to the wall and left the pen there. That night, we stayed locked in the control room. None of us spoke. The sea outside was glowing faintly again, not red this time, but pale blue, pulsing like light through veins. The whole rig vibrated with the rhythm of something ancient and alive. At 3 o'clock, the hatch we'd welded shut began to rattle. The sound was faint at first, then louder. Then, for the first time, we heard it clearly. Not through the walls, not through the sea, through the air. A voice, soft, whispering. Human, don't be afraid. You're part of it now? The sound came from everywhere at once, the vents, the pipes, the metal beneath our feet. Bazidar covered his ears, sobbing. It's in the walls. Dobrev just sat there, eyes unfocused, whispering back to it. I couldn't hear what he said. When dawn came, the sea had swallowed the lower decks completely. The water level was rising, but the pressure sensors didn't detect flooding. It wasn't water filling the structure. It was something else. Something thicker, heavier, alive. By noon, the rig was trembling like a living thing, and by nightfall, the sea began to breathe. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. The walls never stopped trembling. A slow, rhythmic vibration that came from deep below, like the rig itself had become part of something living. Every time it pulsed, the air pressure shifted just enough to make your ears pop. When the sun rose. It wasn't sunlight that came through the storm clouds. It was a strange metallic glow that washed over everything in dull silver. The sea mirrored it perfectly, turning the world into one seamless, reflective surface. It was beautiful and wrong at the same time. The kind of beauty that makes you feel like you shouldn't be looking at it. The surface shimmered in waves. But there was no wind. The fog was gone, the horizon clear. And in that eerie calm, the first sound broke through. The radio. The static wasn't random anymore. It had rhythm. A steady clicking, spaced evenly, rising and falling like a heartbeat. Then, slowly, voices began to layer through the interference. Fragmented, mechanical, overlapping. Help us. Help us. Below deck. It's beautiful. Open the hatch. Marin's voice was in there too. Clear as day, Dobrev smashed the radio off the console, but the voices didn't stop. They kept coming, spilling out of the ventilation ducts now, soft, distant, echoing like sound through a tunnel. Don't listen, Dobrev said, pressing his palms to his ears. They're not real. But they sounded real. They sounded like home. Bazidar broke first. He stumbled to the control room door, muttering to himself, and before anyone could stop him, he unlatched it. The sound that poured in from outside wasn't the ocean. It was breathing. Slow, deep, drawn-out inhalations that made the entire structure vibrate with every exhale. He looked back at us, smiled weakly, and said, It's calling us back. Then he stepped outside. The moment the door shut behind him, the entire rig went silent. The vibrations stopped. Even the lights froze. Mid-dash flicker dot, we waited. 1 minute, 2, 10 dot, no screams. No sounds dot, just silence. When we finally worked up the courage to open the door again, Bezito was gone. His boots were still on the deck, perfectly aligned, toes pointing toward the sea. Between them, a puddle of black liquid rippled slowly, even though there was no wind. I knelt beside it. The reflection wasn't my face dot, it was just dot eyes open. Mouth moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then the liquid stilled, and the image faded. Dobrov dragged me back inside and slammed the door shut. "You look long enough," he said through his teeth, and it starts looking back. He locked every hatch after that dot by late afternoon. The silver light had turned white, blinding against the metal. The air tasted like iron, and every breath burned a little. Marin's old headset, the one we'd turned off, suddenly flickered back on by itself. A whisper came through. Not static this time, but perfect clarity. "It's awake." Then the sound changed. It wasn't a voice anymore. It was a hum. High-pitched, vibrating, pushing deep into the skull. Anton screamed and ripped the headset off. The skin around his ears was bleeding. The humming didn't stop. It spread through the air, rattling the glass, shaking loose screws from the walls. The floodlights outside began flashing in sequence, one after another, like a signal. I looked through the narrow slit of the blackout curtain and saw the surface of the sea moving. Not in waves, in patterns. Concentric circles of light radiating outward, each pulse timed with the hum. Something was rising again. The glow beneath the water brightened. And this time, it wasn't blue or red. It was silver, pure and blinding. The shape coming up wasn't smooth like before. It was textured, rough, layered with what looked like debris, except as it neared the surface. I realized it wasn't debris dot. It was structures. Metal, concrete, fragments of other rigs. The sea was bringing them up. A city of wreckage slowly surfaced beneath us, shimmering under the pale light. Towers of steel and rusted walkways stretched just below the waves. I saw names stenciled on the hulls, oil companies, vessels, entire operations that had disappeared years ago, and in the middle of it all, something vast shifted. The water bent around it, rippling as though displaced by an invisible mass. Dobrov stared through the glass, his lips trembling. "It's not the seafloor," he whispered. "It's the surface of something larger." The hum reached a peak. The air smelled like burning copper. The power in the control room flickered violently, and for a moment, every screen lit up at once. Static, then words, text scrolling faster than we could read. System overrides, protocols, shutdowns. Among the chaos, one line repeated endlessly. Merge sequence initiated. Anton screamed and pulled the main breaker. Sparks flew. The hum died instantly, leaving a ringing silence. The monitors all went black. Then, faintly, from the vent above us, we heard breathing again. But this time, it wasn't distant. It was inside. Dobrov looked up slowly. "Run," he whispered. The vent cover rattled once. Then something wet and heavy dropped out, hitting the floor with a dull thud. It looked human at first. Then it moved. Its skin was translucent, its limbs too long, bending in the wrong directions. Beneath the surface, something pulsed, glowing faintly silver. Its mouth opened, wide, impossibly wide, and when it exhaled, the air around us rippled like heat. The thing turned its head toward Dobrov and spoke in a perfect imitation of his voice. "We are awake." He fired his flare gun point blank. The creature convulsed, shrieking with a sound that split my head open. Then it collapsed, melting into a pool of liquid that hissed as it seeped into the cracks of the floor. For a moment, the room was silent again. Then every pipe in the rig started vibrating at once. The sound rose from below, building into a deep, thunderous resonance that shook the entire platform. Through the window, the sea churned for the first time in weeks. Massive swells forming around the rig. Silver foam crusting like veins bursting open. Dobrov shouted over the noise. "It's pulling the rig down." Anton ran for the emergency release switch. but the lever wouldn't move. The whole structure tilted, groaning as metal screamed beneath us. Then, silence. Everything stopped. The rig steadied. The light outside dimmed back to gray. For a moment, it looked like dawn had finally come, but it wasn't dawn. The light was coming from below. The sea was glowing again, not like before, not like breath or blood. It was steady now, bright and pure, spreading outward in every direction. Dobrov sank to his knees, staring out at it. His voice broke when he spoke. "That's not light," he said. "That's its eyes opening." And the moment he said it, the rig began to sink. At first, it didn't feel like sinking. It felt like the world itself was tilting, gravity pulling sideways instead of down. The coffee mug slid off the counter. Bolts rolled across the floor. Every sound was swallowed by the same low groan rising through the hull. A noise so deep it felt like the air itself was bending. The rig shuddered once, violently. The lights flickered and died. Then, for the first time since I'd arrived here, I felt real motion, not the sway of waves or the creak of wind, but the slow, steady descent of an entire structure being dragged downward. We ran. The hallways were alive with echoes. Metal grinding, alarms screaming uselessly as the emergency power failed. Steam burst from the pipes, turning everything into blinding fog. I could barely hear my own voice as I shouted for Dobrov. For Anton. Anyone. Through the haze, I saw him, Dobrov, crouched over the control console, trying to override the ballast system manually. His hand shook as he slammed the levers back and forth. "It's locked," he yelled. "It's overriding me." "What's overriding you?" I shouted back. He didn't answer. The deck lurched again. We hit the floor hard. From somewhere deep below, a booming impact echoed, like the sound of an anchor chain snapping. Then came the rush of water, except it wasn't water. The smell hit first. Metallic, sharp, organic. When it touched the floor plates, the steel began to hiss, corroding instantly. It rose fast, black and glimmering, crawling instead of flowing. "Get to the upper level," Dobrov screamed. We sprinted up the emergency ladder. The fog grew thicker as the deck below vanished beneath the black tide. The entire rig was sinking faster now. The horizon climbing the windows until all that remained was the endless dark sea. Halfway up, Anton stopped climbing. His flashlight beam froze on a wall, and on the wall. Something was moving, shapes pressed outward from the metal, like faces trying to push through skin. Mouths opened and closed in silence, stretching the steel into thin sheets. Eyes blinked beneath the surface, reflecting faint silver light. I grabbed his arm. "Don't look at them." Too late. Anton's body stiffened. He dropped his light, and it hit the floor with a clang. The sound was swallowed instantly by the hum rising around us, a low, vibrating tone that made the air vibrate in my lungs. His eyes rolled back, and he started speaking in a voice that wasn't his. "You see now? You were never above it? You were always inside?" Then his chest burst open, no blood, just a flood of that black fluid, pouring from his mouth and ribs like he'd been filled with it. His body collapsed, dissolving into the same sludge. Merging with the floor, Dobrov pulled me upward. Shouting words I couldn't hear, we reached the upper deck just as the structure tilted another 30 degrees. The sky, if you could call it that, was white now, glowing with the same false light that had risen from below. The sea boiled, steam rising in pillars as far as I could see. The floodlights exploded one by one. Shards of glass and sparks fell like rain. The antenna snapped, vanishing into the mist. I looked toward the horizon. There was no horizon. The sea had lifted itself higher than the rig, curving upward like a massive wall of living water. Beneath its surface, shapes moved, colossal and slow, twisting like veins in a body made of liquid, and in the center of it all was the glow. The same pulsing light from before, now blindingly bright, spreading across the sky in waves. Dobrov was screaming something beside me, pointing toward the crane tower. I couldn't hear him. My eardrums felt like they were tearing under the pressure, but I understood what he meant. The lifeboat hung halfway off the tilted deck, its cables swinging wildly. I nodded and we ran. The deck beneath our feet vibrated harder with every step. The sound wasn't just under us anymore, it was inside us. I could feel the rhythm syncing with my heartbeat, forcing my pulse to match it. By the time we reached the crane, the sea was roaring. Not like water, like an enormous mouth inhaling. We climbed into the boat and started cutting the cables manually. Dobrev's hands slipped on the wet metal, his fingers raw. "Come on." He shouted. The first cable snapped. The boat jerked sideways. The second went, and the entire platform beneath us groaned, splitting down the middle. That's when I saw them. The faces, hundreds of them, rising from the sea like bubbles in molten glass. Pale, featureless, but all with eyes that opened in perfect unison. Staring upward at the rig, and in every reflection, I saw myself. The last cable snapped. The boat plunged sideways, crashing against the hull before hitting the water. The impact knocked the breath out of me. When I looked up, the rig was collapsing, its towers folding inward like ribs being crushed. Fire burst from the generator deck. A final flash of orange swallowed instantly by the Black Sea. I tried to find Dobrev, but he wasn't in the boat anymore. Just his jacket, floating near the edge. I reached for it, but it slipped beneath the surface, vanishing into the dark. Then the sound returned. A chorus, hundreds of voices layered together, rising from the depths. Not screaming, not moaning, singing. The same rhythmic hum, now clearer, melodic, almost gentle. I looked down. The water wasn't black anymore. It was translucent. Beneath the surface, I could see shapes, massive, indistinct, coiling around each other. In their center, something pulsed with a soft silver light. The song grew louder. My vision blurred. The air shimmered. I don't remember climbing out of the boat. I don't remember falling in. But suddenly the cold was gone, replaced by warmth, light pressing against my eyelids like sunlight. When I opened my eyes, I was floating in endless gray. No sea, no sky. Just motion. Slow and constant, as if I were being carried somewhere. Around me, other shapes drifted too. Human, maybe, but hollow. Their mouths moved in perfect synchronization. The sea remembers. Then the world cracked open. The surface above split like glass, and a blinding light poured through. For one final moment, I saw the rig twisted, half-submerged, vanishing into the vast shadow that moved beneath it. And before it disappeared completely, I saw something rise, something colossal, uncoiling, its body covered in eyes that blinked once before closing forever. The light went out, and the sea swallowed everything. When I woke up, there was no sound. No waves, no wind, no humming machinery, only silence. The kind that feels thick, like it's pressing against your skin. I was lying on cold metal. The air smelled like rust and oil. When I sat up, my vision swam, and for a moment, I thought I was still underwater. But I wasn't. The sky above was dark gray. The clouds hanging motionless like smoke, trapped beneath glass. The rig was still there, or what was left of it. Half of the structure had collapsed into the sea. The rest was tilted, groaning quietly with every slow shift of the waves. Fires still burned on the far deck, small and orange against the endless gray horizon. The lifeboat was gone. So was everyone else. I called their names. Dobrev, Anton. But my voice felt hollow. The sound didn't carry. It vanished the instant it left my mouth. Absorbed by the heavy air dot, I tried the radio. Static. The same rhythmic pulse buried under it. I turned the dial until I realized it wasn't coming from the signal. It was coming from the walls. Thump, thump, thump. Like a heartbeat buried in steel. I climbed up to the control tower. Every step felt heavier than the last. The air inside was warmer, humid, like the rig itself was breathing. The door to the control room was half melted, warped around the hinges. When I pushed it open, a gust of air came out that smelled faintly of blood and salt. And there he was. D-O-B-R-E-V. He was sitting in the corner, back against the wall, his face pale and waxy. His eyes were open, staring at the floor. In his hands was a sheet of paper, folded, crumpled, stained with something dark. I took it from him carefully. The handwriting was jagged, desperate. The sea is alive. It remembers every sound, every face, every name. The only way to survive is to forget it exists. Underneath, he'd written one final line, smaller, almost an afterthought. If you remember it, it remembers you. I looked up. Dobrev blinked once. Just once. Then his mouth twitched, and in a voice that wasn't his, he whispered, "It's still listening." Then he stopped breathing. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the paper. The air around me began to vibrate again, low, steady, like a hum growing under my feet. I could feel it spreading through the deck, pulsing up the walls. The rig groaned. I ran Dot outside. The sky had darkened to near black. The sea below was still as glass, but every few seconds, faint ripples spread outward from the platform, perfect concentric circles, as if something massive was shifting beneath it. I climbed the staircase to the top deck, the wind cutting sharp against my skin. When I reached the highest platform, I could see the full extent of the damage. The main deck was half submerged. The cranes were twisted, pointing straight into the sea like skeletal fingers. The oil flames that burned earlier were gone, snuffed out by the mist, and that mist was rising again. It came from the surface, slow and deliberate, curling upward around the rig like smoke. I could hear faint sounds within it, not words exactly, but fragments, whispers, familiar voices. Marin's laugh, Bazidar's prayer, Anton's scream, then, beneath it all, my own voice. You were always inside. I stumbled backward, clutching my head. The mist thickened, pressing against my face. The air grew warmer, wet, suffocating. When I looked down at my hands, they were shaking, slick with condensation that wasn't sweat. It smelled like salt and iron. The whispers got louder, until I couldn't tell which one was mine anymore. The fog swirled tighter, wrapping around me like hands. I dropped to my knees, gasping. Somewhere below, metal screamed. The deck shifted under me, slow at first, then faster. I crawled toward the railing and looked down. The sea was boiling. Not water, not anymore. The surface was alive, rolling and writhing with shapes that almost looked human, but weren't. Arms, faces, eyes, all reaching upward in silence. Then, from deep below, something moved, the same glow as before. Silver, soft, pulsing, rose toward the surface. The fog illuminated around it, outlining veins in the vapor like capillaries under skin. The heartbeat grew louder. Thumped. Thump. Each pulse shook the platform. I backed away, tripping over loose metal, until my back hit the door to the communications room. I didn't realize I'd gone inside until I saw the blinking light on the console. The radio, dead for days, was transmitting again. The speaker crackled softly. Then a voice, mine. If anyone hears this, follow the rules. Do not look at the sea. Do not speak your name. Do not open the doors after midnight. If you hear them whisper, stay still. And if you survive till morning, forget it. Forget everything. The recording looped, repeating every 30 seconds. I stared at the mic, realizing it wasn't recording me anymore. It was replaying something that hadn't happened yet. Then the lights dimmed. The hum grew louder. Through the static, I heard breathing, long, slow, wet. You're awake. The voice was mine again, but drawn out, distorted, layered beneath a dozen other tones. I turned off the radio. The sound didn't stop. It filled the entire room. Something was moving in the doorway. A shadow, human-shaped, but wrong. Its head tilted. The joints bending the wrong way. It stepped closer. The floor creaked. I backed into the corner, clutching Dobrev's note, the paper trembling in my hand. The shadow stopped inches from me. I could feel the air between us grow colder. Then it spoke again. You remember? That's why you're still here. It leaned closer, and for the first time, I saw its face. It was mine, not a reflection, not a trick of light. My own face, pale and waterlogged, staring back at me. Its eyes were dark, hollow, but alive, moving, studying me like I was the copy. Then, slowly, it smiled. "The last rule," it whispered, its breath freezing against my ear. "Never stay awake when it calls your name." The light in the room flickered once, then went out. The last thing I heard was the sound of water trickling under the door. Slow, deliberate, and endless. And somewhere beneath it all, faint but clear, came my own voice on the radio, whispering the rules one last time. "The sea remembers. Do not let it remember you." Recovered file designation, a UDI-007 source, Nordpetra drilling rig Vireo. Timestamp, unknown, transmission length, 1403. Status, classified, analysis ongoing. A faint hiss, followed by static. Then a click, breathing, slow, uneven, voice, male, fatigued, unidentified. Testing. 1, 2. If anyone hears this, don't come here. Don't send another team. Don't even look up the coordinates. The Black Sea doesn't give things back. It keeps them. The microphone rattles softly, metal scraping metal. A pause. I was part of the recovery unit. We reached what was left of the Vireo 3 weeks after it went dark. Command said the structure was stable. That was a lie. It was floating, half sunk, cables torn, the upper deck twisted like something had tried to fold it in half. There was no movement. No crew. Only one signal left. This one. The static thickens. Something drips near the mic. Slow. Rhythmic. We boarded at 5:40. The air was dense, almost fluid. Inside, the corridors looked melted. Not burned, not flooded. Melted, like the metal had softened and hardened again. Every surface was covered in a fine film like dried salt. I found the control room first. It was still powered, somehow. Every monitor was blank except one. A single line of text pulsing in the center of the screen. Follow the rules. A faint mechanical whine. The speaker's breathing quickens. The console was looping a recording. I'll play it. Click. The playback of a second, older recording begins. The voice is low, distant, distorted by static. Second voice, familiar, trembling. If anyone hears this, follow the rules. Don't open the doors after dark. Don't look at the sea. It's alive. It remembers you. The audio cuts off abruptly with a burst of static. A faint wet sound follows, like something dragging. First voice. And that was him. Whoever made that recording. He never left the rig. We found his body in the comms room. Still seated. The recorder was fused to the desk, like the heat had welded it there. His hand was clutching a piece of paper. Paper rustles. I'll read what's left. The sea is alive. It remembers every sound. The only way to survive is to forget it exists. Its sign was one name. Dobrov. A long pause. The static shifts tone, almost rhythmic. It sounds like breathing. After we found him, the team started hearing things. First in the vents, soft knocking, like someone trapped inside the walls. Then the voices started. They said, our names. Every one of us. The first to break was Hughes. He swore he saw someone outside the observation window, waving him over. Said it looked like his brother. He unsealed the hatch before anyone could stop him. There was no splashback, just silence. A faint hum builds beneath the static. The voice lowers, almost whispering. The sea was calm. Too calm, not a ripple. Then we saw it, the reflection. There were faces in the water. Hundreds, maybe thousands. All staring up. Their mouths opened and closed. Perfectly in sync. We pulled back. Sealed the deck. But by then it was too late. The rig started to shake again. The lights flickered. That's when we heard the last transmission. A different voice breaks in, suddenly. Faint, but clear. Higher pitched. Frantic. Third voice. It's under us. It's moving. The rig's not anchored anymore. It's attached. The feed distorts violently. Feedback shrieking. The original voice returns. Calmer now. Resigned. First voice. We tried to leave. The lifeboats were gone. The sea took them. Every compass spun. GPS said we were inland, 1,000 miles from water. The air pressure dropped, and then the fog rolled in. That's when we realized we weren't on the surface anymore. We were below it. Silence. Then a distant knock. 3 slow hits. Pause. 3 more. The man's breathing stops for several seconds. I think it's in the hull again. Every time it knocks, the lights dim. I tried counting between them. The intervals match a heartbeat. Not mine. Not human. The sound of footsteps. Something wet drips. The speaker whispers now, voice trembling. I have started forgetting the faces of the others. I know I came here with a team. 5, maybe 6. But I can't remember their voices. Every time I try, I hear my own instead. The static shifts pitch. A faint voice repeating under it. His own words. Layered. They said if we found the recorder, to bring it back. I can't, because every time I try to leave, the sea moves. The horizon bends. The rig turns back toward it, like it's being pulled home. The sound of breathing grows slower. There's a faint creak of metal, like something enormous brushing against the hull. There's a light below us now. Bright. Steady. I thought it was dawn. But it's coming from the water. I know what it is. It's the same thing Dobrev wrote about. The same thing that took them. The same thing that's been listening through every transmission since the first one. It's not the seafloor. It's an I. A long silence. Then the sound of scraping metal. Slow. Rhythmic. Water begins dripping faster. If anyone finds this log, don't listen to it. Don't play it out loud. Don't even write down what it says. Because that's how it remembers you. A deep groan reverberates through the audio, almost like a sigh. Then faint words, whispered close to the microphone. The sea dreams through us. The static builds, screaming feedback, then cuts out. The transmission ends. End of file. A UDIO 007. Recovered from debris 32 nautical miles east of Black Sea, Quadrant 7C. Note. Background audio analysis reveals continuous subsonic resonance, consistent with biological patterning. Status. Transmission repeating automatically every night at 23 o'clock. It's strange how quickly people forget. 6 months after the Vireo went dark, NordPetra quietly scrubbed its registry. Officially, the platform was lost at sea during a seismic event. No bodies recovered. No survivors. Then they built another one. A new rig, anchored only 30 nautical miles east of the old site. Brand new steel, new equipment, new faces. An operation rebranded as Project. Sable 9, the company press. Release called it the most advanced offshore platform in the Black Sea. They said nothing about the first one. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't crew anymore. Just a contractor, a systems technician sent to calibrate their comms array before launch. The new crew had arrived 2 weeks earlier. Fresh recruits, young, optimistic. They reminded me of us before the silence began. When the helicopter touched down, I noticed it immediately. The sea. The same stillness. The same color. A flat, dark mirror stretching forever. The pilot joked that it looked like asphalt. I didn't laugh. A welcoming committee met us on deck. Their foreman, clean uniform, fresh patchwork helmet, smiled like a man who didn't know what that smile cost the last one. Welcome to Sable 9, he said. The safest rig in the fleet. The phrase made my stomach twist. He led us through the structure, proudly listing upgrades, reinforced ballast tanks, new isolation seals, redundant power lines. Everything gleamed. Even the walls smelled of new paint. But as we passed through the mess hall, I stopped cold. There, pinned to the bulletin board, was a laminated sheet of rules, printed in clean black text. Rules of night. Protocol. No exterior doors open after 2300. Maintain. Blackout conditions during power failures. Do. Not use radios between 230050. Never. Acknowledge voices outside the structure. Report any infractions. Immediately. The same words. The same font. The same red border. Who wrote these? I asked quietly. The foreman blinked. Corporate safety directive, he said. Standard issue. You'll find them on every NordPetra site now. I didn't tell him they weren't corporate rules. They were warnings. That night, after dinner, the wind died. Not a breath of air moved across the sea. I stepped out onto the catwalk, flashlight in hand. The metal was cold under my boots. Below, the water glimmered faintly, but not from the moon, from something deeper. Through the fog, I could just make out the faint shadow of wreckage below. Twisted beams. Rusted platforms. The bones of the Vireo. They hadn't even moved it. They'd built on top of it. I stared down into the depths until my reflection blurred. Then, from behind me, a voice said, "You shouldn't be out here." It was the new foreman. His face looked different in the dark. Older, somehow. I started to apologize, but he cut me off. No, I mean it literally. After 11, you stay inside. That's what the old crew did. The old crew? I asked. You mean the last site? He didn't answer. He just looked at the water for a long time, then walked away. The following morning, I found something wedged in the corner of the equipment locker. A small corroded device about the size of a handheld radio. Its casing was cracked, but a faded label still clung to the back. Property of NordPetra Drilling, Vireo Division. When I turned it over, a red light blinked once. Then the speaker crackled. A familiar voice, faint, distorted, whispered through the static. Do not look directly at the sea after 2,300 hours. It was my own voice. I dropped the unit. It hit the floor, still hissing. The new foreman rushed in, asking if everything was okay. But when I pointed to the corner, the device was gone. He didn't even ask what I'd seen. He just looked tired, like he already knew. That night, the same stillness returned. The crew laughed in the mess hall, their voices echoing off the steel. Someone turned on a small radio, playing music through the static. But the signal began to falter around 22:30. The voices on the track warped, slowed, reversed dot at 22:59. The music cut out completely. Dot in its place came a faint knocking from the hull. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I told them to shut the lights. They laughed. Thought I was joking. Dot. Then the power failed. For 7 seconds. Everything went black. When the backup lights flickered back on. Something was different. The ocean outside had changed color. Dot. It wasn't black anymore. It was silver, like dawn. But coming from beneath. Dot, the crew pressed to the window, staring. One whispered, "Is that the moon?" It wasn't. From the deep, the glow intensified, outlining the skeletal wreckage of the old rig below. For a brief moment, I saw the entire structure tilted, half-buried, its twisted frame pulsing with light from within, and then something enormous moved through it. A ripple passed upward through the water. A soundless wave that struck the hull like a heartbeat. Every light on the new rig flickered. Then, from the vent above the mess hall, came a whisper. Still here now. The same words that had been written on the glass of the old Vireo's control room. The crew froze. The foreman's face turned white. He whispered, "What the hell was that?" I looked at him, my voice barely audible. That wasn't wind. When the alarm stopped, we sealed the doors. No one slept out by morning. The light had faded. The sea was flat again, perfectly still. The company would later log it as electromagnetic interference. But I know what it was. They built Sable 9 on the bones of the first rig. The thing beneath never died. It only waited. Dot, and now it has a new crew to remember. When the supply helicopter lifted off at sunrise, I looked back one last time. The platform gleamed under the cold light, pristine and silent. The new workers waved as the rotors cut the air, their faces bright, eager, unaware. But behind them, in the shadow of the crane tower, I saw movement, faint just for a second. A figure standing near the railing, facing the water. Dot. It was wearing my uniform, and it was smiling. The report never made it to headquarters. Dot. They told the families that Sable 9 suffered a structural implosion due to subsea instability. No survivors. No debris. Just another silent page in a long corporate ledger of disasters that never happened. But I know better, because I still receive the transmissions. Every night at 23 o'clock, my receiver turns itself on. It doesn't matter if it's unplugged. It doesn't matter if I throw it away. The signal always finds me, and the voice that speaks through it now isn't a stranger's anymore. It's mine. It started again 3 weeks after I left the Black Sea. I was back on the mainland. Small apartment. Gray walls, trying to forget. The world felt quieter, flatter. Food tasted like nothing. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear the heartbeat in the pipes. That slow metallic thump echoing through my skull. The first night it came, I thought it was a dream. The static rose softly from the corner of the room, building like a storm far away. Then, buried under the noise, I heard myself speaking. Calm, controlled. Do not open the door after midnight. Do not look at your reflection. If you hear the knocking, stay still. I sat there frozen, watching the red light blink on the dead receiver. The message played once, then again. Each repetition slightly different. The pauses changing, the voice thickening, as if whatever was repeating, it was learning how to speak. By the fifth loop, it added a new line. You left the sea. But the sea did not leave you. I smashed the receiver that night, took it to pieces until the wires were bare. Threw it out. The next morning, there was another one on my kitchen table. Same make. Same serial number. Same blinking red light. I tried leaving the city. Booked a room inland, hundreds of miles from the coast. But the signal followed. I could hear it through the phone lines, through the hotel vents, even through the silence between my own heartbeats. Sometimes. Late at night, I'd hear faint tapping on the walls. 3 knocks. Pause 3 more. And in the stillness after a whisper, 13. I stopped sleeping. Started writing everything down, the way Dobrev did. Lists of rules, cross-references, diagrams of the rig's layout. Anything that made me feel like I still understood what happened. But the more I wrote, the less I remembered. Names began slipping first. Marin, Anton. I could see their faces clearly. But not what they'd said to me, not how they died. When I read the notes again, whole sentences were missing. Just empty space where I knew words had been. It wasn't memory loss. It was extraction. Something was pulling the information out of me. Quietly, patiently. Every time I remembered. It remembered too. On the 12th night, I recorded the transmission. This time, the voice sounded closer. The sea remembers you. The 13th crew member is awake. It's time to come back. The static thickened, shaping itself into something rhythmic. Not random anymore, but deliberate. Morse-like patterns pulsing under the words. When I slowed the playback, the code spelled out one line. Depth, 0. No coordinates. Just that. The ocean had risen to meet me. Last night, I finally spoke without the radio. I was sitting in the dark, the receiver unplugged, the window locked. The city outside was silent, no cars, no wind, nothing. Then, from somewhere deep in the building, came the sound of metal bending. It started low, like the groan of a ship hull under pressure. Then closer, in the pipes, the vents. The floorboards. When I looked at the glass of my window, I saw it fogging over from the inside. Words began forming through the condensation, traced by an invisible hand. Still here now. The same message from the rig, the same handwriting. I turned away, but my reflection didn't. It stayed facing the glass, its eyes moving a fraction slower than mine. Then its mouth opened, and I heard my own voice whisper, "You broke the last rule." I ran. I don't remember leaving the apartment. I don't remember the streets. Just the feeling of cold air, sharp, wet, familiar. When I came to, I was standing on the docks. The fog rolling off the water smelled of salt and oil, exactly like the Black Sea. There was a ship waiting there. No markings. No crew. Just a single light glowing in the WAELOUSE dot, and over the radio. My voice again, distorted through static. Come home. I stepped aboard. The deck was wet, though it hadn't rained in days. The moment my foot touched the steel, I felt it. That vibration. The heartbeat, slow, deep. The fog behind me thickened until the shore was gone. The engine started by itself. The wheel turned dot in the sea, dark, endless, hungry, open to meet me. Unverified recording attached. 2:41 minutes, labeled Transmission 13. The sound of gentle waves. A low hum builds. A male voice, calm, familiar, begins speaking. If anyone hears this. Don't come looking. Don't follow the signal. It isn't a call for help. We thought the rules kept us safe, but they were instructions. A ritual. Every time we spoke them, we gave it shape. It doesn't live in the sea. The sea lives in it. The hum grows louder. Wet, heavy footsteps approach the mic. Breathing. Then a faint knocking. 3. Pause. 3. 13 names. 13 faces. It needs one more. A deep inhalation. The voice lowers to a whisper. I remember now. The sound of water rushing in. Static. Then faintly. Do not let it remember you. The transmission cuts off. A brief silence. Then one final noise. Soft, rhythmic, unmistakable. Thump, 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 and log. Recovered 4118 and 3638. No vessel located. Signal repeats nightly at 23 o'clock local time. Voice identical to operator who filed the first incident report. The 13th transmission never ends.